So everything we did so far this semester functioned as a warm-up exercise or to build up basically the understanding of sub-D modeling, modifiers, and how to do that actually with the interface with Blender. And at this point, I think we should go into working on design projects that are the most suitable for this type of sub-D sculpting. So everything that's very linear, obviously you can do perfectly in any CAD application, Fusion or Alias or such. But where you have very organic shapes, for example, like here with this toothbrush, the sub-D sculpting will be dramatically faster for the creative exploration phase. And because most of the programs today increasingly also support this type of geometry, all the work we do here in Blender, we can bring over and finish then in Fusion. So our final piece will actually be the rubber overmolded parts, thanks to the modifiers. The core, where actually the rubber mold perfectly fits on it. And just then to finish it for presentation purpose, we also put down representational geometry to show where and how the results, for example, could look like. I will supply you with one blend file that has actually screenshots of my design already added to the top, the side, and the bottom view. So we can perfectly use those as a modeling guide. So how do we start? Well, I will put my 3D cursor to the center and then simply create a cube. And in edit mode, scale this cube down a lot and then scale it to the side. Because essentially what I will do first is I have no idea what geometry I might need. So I have to explore this design problem a little bit. Then I could press Control 4, so I add a sub-D modifier, and then for example you can see that this cube becomes like a stretched football. We only have 8 vertices. We need more vertices to actually sculpt this shell. So we will add maybe some loop cuts. How many? I honestly have no idea because I have to just experiment a little bit. So in this case now, maybe it might make sense to work from the top. So I'll try to take a look at maybe how does the curvature go. So here we have an end, here it bends out, so I need a loop cut. Here it goes down and I need a loop cut. It goes back out, I need a loop cut, and it gets down, I need a loop cut. Okay, so now let's try to rearrange those loop cuts I have for a moment. And there, this one stays, and maybe that one goes to there. Okay, and a small tip for visibility. You see the background image is kind of grayish. We can adjust, for example, opacity of, this is the top view with this slider. And I also can say be in front or in the back. If I put it to the front or the back, you see in the front it's easier to see actually through. So it's an overlay over my 3D object. And so that everything will be easier to see, I will color this one a little bit. Okay, good. So now I can go ahead and, for example, start scaling all this geometry. Shift X, just scale down. There, a little bit smaller. S, there. And I said like here here it gets smaller, so I will need probably 2 loop cuts. Quick quickly scale it down and apart with SX. This can scale down there, and then move it over to there. Okay. So I just do a really rough mock-up. Let's see how my part looks and how actually the design looks. Now in this view, I can actually move this one maybe a little bit further to the outside, so I get closer to the actual geometry of my screenshot. S and Shift X to scale it down a little bit, maybe push this in, push this one out. Okay, for example, here it is too white. So, yeah. So maybe there. It looks like I actually need an additional loop cut here. So I can push this one nicely in. This one has to stay outside a little bit. This one will go to here and maybe to there. And I move this one up and down all the time so I can see where my orange geometry is and where actually my my target is. So my background image. So let's turn this one on and to the back. Now I can see actually where it sticks over. So GG, slide it over there. GG. Want to pinch this a little bit more. I don't get that geometry the way I want. So maybe push this one over, tick there. How does this currently look? Okay. There. The loop pad was too close actually. There. Okay. Good. You a little bit back. Tick bigger. I would say the right side is good. Well, let's take a look at the front side. So maybe scale this one down. Oh, look, and that hits actually this curvature pretty well. This way, this bends out and goes down, so I will need to have some sort of a loop cut system there to pinch the geometry. So Control R, push this one in so it's the same thickness, and then push it out. And let's see how this overlays. Not too bad. But you see that this is a nice and smooth transition, but in my screenshot here, this is really tight. So what we have to do now is these things here have to get smaller. Okay, so this seems to fit, and then this one maybe go over to there, this one maybe over to there. Also make sure that you have this one, for example, not turned on. You see, I can see actually through my mesh and also select through my mesh. Very helpful for this task. And let's see, this is pretty decent. So can I maybe make this one a tick bigger and get that shape? Looks, I'm pretty close. Okay, maybe this one a tick bigger. Yeah. Okay, so that was basically the side, the top view. Now we can take a look at the side view. So here, in this case, I will just work with the projection of my low polygon cache onto my sub-D surface, and then I can push and pull these corners till, for example, I get that look. This one follows it. This one will go up a notch. That means, and this one wants to go down a notch. this one will go down to there. Okay. And so here, I know I pushed this one up a little bit because later I will shave certain parts away. So this one might have been this way. And all this I select, switch to bounding box SZ0. Select all this SZ and 0. And for example, I will select this as well, SZ0 and SZ0. And then, for example, move this one down. And I want to do a quick thickness test. Yeah, we're getting close. But I don't really like actually the fact that this is now modeled at an angle. I will show you two techniques how we could work around this. But I will keep this one flat for the moment, like this. And then we will continue refining the design from that position. So let's actually fix this. And you go up. And I'm close to say that we're reaching our desired target. Maybe tick up. There we have to eyeball. And this one here I know actually has to be a little bit more there. And then all this, including that one. For example, I push down till there. And then those two I can push up a little bit. Yeah, there's a little bit of refinement I have to do afterwards. Maybe to there. Yeah. Okay, so this is kind of like our first quick sculpt. And you see that this is a very organic shape, and it was just really ridiculously easy to get that type of beautiful flow just with carefully positioned loop cuts, and then just push and pull and scaling, positioning all these loop cuts kind of like where we need them to be. So I mentioned before that this area here is concerning me a little bit. So I will place my 3D cursor roughly there and then create a big plane in edit mode, scale this plane down, and then in object mode I will rotate this one because I want to see what's the rotation. So looks like 4° or something like this. Okay, so this is maybe attempt one, how we could easily build this design a little bit more controlled. Because essentially what I want to maintain is that all these CVs are nicely vertical and horizontal, but then the piece is actually bent. So I could select this plane, go to local, and then go to transform orientations. You see local is selected, and click plus. If I click on this one, you see there we have something called plane. I actually baked this local XYZ orientation. Let's say toothbrush, whoops, tip. And we can name it. Okay, so this one we can now delete because we don't need it anymore. If I now go ahead and, for example, select all these points and, for example, say rotate 4°, so that's what I have to memorize. You see now actually with this orientation also selected here, I can move those along, kind of like a 4-degree axis up and down. So this is actually pretty nice. And then I can move this one up and maybe move this one a little bit up, and this one maybe a tick down, tick up. Yeah, and for example here, I know this one will stick out a little bit more, this one will go in a little bit more. Okay. Yeah, not too bad. So that was actually way number one. What you really need to understand is how much, for example, did you rotate the mesh, and then you can always switch between global, local, or then those specific orientation vectors you created. So let me show you also variation number 2, where I do not want to work with such a custom orientation. So I will actually select this and then Shift S, cursor to selected, object mode, and then tool, set origin to 3D cursor. And at that position, I will create a spline. Okay, and then the spline I will scale down. With V, set everything to a vector. At this point, I will say Shift S, selection to cursor. So the cursor is actually where the object center point is, and I move that last spline point to there. I can turn the handles off for the moment. So what's this one useful for? Well, if I, for example, name it, so bend curve, I could select my toothbrush object. Let's actually call this one start. And then I will add a deformation modifier, curve. You use this curve along x, minus x. So we have some little orientation issues. So you see actually if I select my spline, this is positive x. See where the arrow goes to. Positive z, positive y, and this is actually negative x. If I click my mesh object, also there, positive x is there. But I tell it, well, deform or bend actually this one along the curve by using positive x. That slightly doesn't work very well, so I guess you see it doesn't really overlay. If I go minus x, yeah, so how could we fix this? Well, it's pretty simple. We go into top view and then we just rotate this one 180 degrees, because then you see now with local, positive x is this way and this object grows this way. And now if we, for example, turn this one on and off, you see nothing really happens. So what's all this for? Now you will see. So we can go into edit mode, and if I move this point left and right, there a little bit happens. If I move this one up, whoa, see it does this. If, for example, I move this line up and this line down, you see like I create actually an S shape and then I bend my object along it. So what I will do is I will add another point, and for example, I'll move this one up a little bit, maybe till there, and let's say this point here is aligned to this vector, so it goes horizontally. Maybe I move this one over a little bit. So see, I can push this one to there. So this area remains straight. And then in my image, roughly around here, the piece starts to bend up. So maybe this one go down a little bit. There. No, I can actually move the spline up. What happens if I stretch it out more? Not much, but if I go in, you see where the craziness happens. So I can actually easily now move this one up and down. And based on how this spline makes a transition into the linear part, that is then how, for example, this object will be deformed. And it looks actually that this is a tick too big. So if I move this one smaller, there we are. So again, this is important that this is actually set to aligned, because initially this was set to be a vector, so linear. Well, I could actually also keep this maybe linear. Let's see. Yeah, never mind. Forget about the curve. Linear actually in this case works pretty well as well. So one last quick step for idea what happens if we flip the direction. Not much. Sometimes this can have an impact because I have a very low polygon object. That one I bend and then that I soften. Otherwise, I have a very low poly object. I make it very dense, and then all this end result I bend. I want to go this way. So curve modifier first and then subsurf. And so what's the whole point about this one? You see, every time when I go into edit mode, this is actually my original mesh. So I could, for example, select all this, move it a little bit up, leave edit mode there. Maybe all this goes down a little bit. That actually means including that point. And then it bends it up. But it's kind of annoying always to have to go forward and backwards. So that's the reason why we could also say, please display my mesh being deformed. So I can select, for example, these points, and while they're being displayed kind of like at an angle, you see actually if I go normal, the Z line faces down, because essentially this is really what I have selected. The modifier simply projects it or displays it the way how at the end after the modifier where these points would be. So now I can simply go in local and move this one straight up and down. You see when I go straight up and down, it looks like these lines go at an angle. So this is actually very nice to work with. And for something like this, I prefer doing it this way because I have a little bit more control in working with very clean, flat geometry, and then the bending I actually use a tool for, because then I can always swap out, for example, a different curve or modify the curve. And let's say, let's do this here, see, wow, try to do this type of a bend just by selecting all these loop cuts. Way too much work. So while the other step before wasn't too bad, I actually would propose to use the curve modifier because your end result is actually maybe the same, but the process is a lot easier. So let's take a look at if there are any other changes we have to do. So far this seems and feels pretty good. Let's shade this one smooth. Okay, good. And let's save it. Because I'm not sure if I'm 100% sure of the shape, so where my hand will be, that's okay, but kind of like here, this area is not, doesn't seem to look very good. So you see there is a certain surface that's cut out. So let's create actually a small surface there. So Shift A, plane, Let's scale this one down. That was R and 4, so 4 degree. Okay, and then this endpoint here. Now I go local, I move it to there. And then maybe extrude this line out. Oh, let's set this one to the world center. Y is 0. Okay. And this one I would like to bevel. Not 10 centimeters, maybe 2 millimeters. Clamp. This object has a scale, so let's Control A, apply the scale, and I have to sneeze, so hold on 1 second. So I'm back. So the reason why we did the bevel is simply I can break this edge a little bit, and I would like to select everything beside this edge. Shift E1, we crease it, and after the bevel we add a sub D surface, maybe with 2. And you see actually this bevel sharpens this edge by adding a kind of like a loop cut, and in this way I can crease this one a little bit more predictable. Could also maybe say, well, let's maybe go with 2 cuts, but maybe this is too flat, so maybe 2 millimeters, maybe a 0.6 or 0.7 for the profile. So you see like how the profile tries to get flatter or sharper, so 0.7. Perfect, good. So let's scale this one down so I only see really what I need. This object is also currently visible, but I want to see where it is, so I set it to wireframe and optimal display, and then I can select this part and say Boolean difference, and this one, oh, okay, intersect for that moment. And now I perfectly can see where, for example, is the surface for my bristles. And we see, not really ideal. This is way too much of a rim around it. So, what's the problem? Main problem is we have a very simple object. And we have a square section. Honestly, I would need left and right maybe another point, so it will be better and more round. Now this is not a perfectly circular object, so I don't necessarily have to restart with a ring, let's say with 8 points. I can actually bake this one time into a higher resolution. So Shift D, escape, M and 2, so I go to the next layer. This one I turn off, and oh, let's turn this one off. And then here I set this to 1, and this I apply. Now you see actually I have more geometry. Okay, so I have more points actually along this way, but unfortunately also this way. So we can see if there are too many points, or maybe I have to loosen everything up a little bit, so I reactivate my curve control and bring back, for example, a sub D modifier. The Boolean is still there, but I can turn it off for the moment. And let's take a look. Essentially, you always want to have the least amount of geometry as possible, because it simply is less work for you. So maybe this loop cut, I don't really think I necessarily need. Yeah. Maybe also this one I can remove for the moment. And then let's see, maybe here I have to bring this one back in. S and Y. So maybe let's turn this one back on. There, and I can just sculpt these parts. Tick. So maybe this one, let's see. Yeah, we can remove S and Y. See, perfect. I am sure this one can go. And we can stretch this one out, bring this one further out. S and Y there, and maybe here this is now too narrow. S and Y. Maybe a tick out there. Not too bad. This curve I like. So let's see about here. I don't think there's much I can get rid of. If I, for example, do it this way, let's see if I bring this one over, S and Y. Yeah, actually I can loosen this a little bit. S and Y. And then this one has to maybe go in a little bit there. And there. Okay. Very easy. Let's take a look from the side. Maybe these points I simply push down a little bit there, and then this one in. Looks like those can go up a notch. There touches, there goes up, there goes down. You see I tried to keep actually the midlines alone. There. Okay. Goody. So, with this done, let's see now. Our original polygon model looks like this. So this end here is not very good. So I will select this point, switch to vertex, and snap to there. Select this one, control, snap to there. So you see I line them up horizontally. Okay, better. And then maybe, let's see, those two shift SX, these things shift SX. Okay, so why did I do this? You see actually how I get this side flat, and there it's still round, but there it's flat. So I will do actually the same also there. SY and 0, SY and 0. And now I have two different sides. I don't want to do double work, so honestly I simply dump all this, and then I will come back with a mirror modifier along the y-axis and move this one to there. So again, the steps are important. We have half a model, we make a full, we bend it, we smooth it, and we trim it. There. Okay, now take a look at this, and for example there, you see it's a really nice detail. This area changed a little bit. Yeah, okay, well this is what we cut away, so not a big deal. So do I now like, for example, how this one goes flat down? So maybe I want to shear actually, let's say this part. So spacebar, shear, or shift, control, alt, S. And let's move the mouse. Takes too long. So maybe with those loop cuts at the same time. Okay, so maybe -1. Ooh, no. -0.5. Yeah, maybe. Okay. That, for example, looks pretty good. Maybe add another loop cut, sub D level for the moment, for the preview to see how this all looks. This is actually pretty pleasing. There's only one issue left. You see where this one cuts? This is kind of roundish. Let's say I would like that not to be the case. So what I could do now is I can select all these points and, for example, say GG. Slide this up. So you see I adjust the loop cut a little bit. Yeah, and then there you see it trims actually after the surface gets slightly roundish. Here, if we project this one onto it, we can see it better. So where my mouse is, there it will cut. Okay, so maybe GG, a little bit more. Could even select this, and snap. Oh, well, why do you do it this way? Oh, that's maybe why. So there. I needed to snap in undeformed mode because otherwise it was snapping to the deformed mode. What you see, what I did was I actually cleaned everything up so the top surface is nice and flat, and then this way this area gets flattish, which it is inside the design. So you see these lines are flat, and for example this defines kind of like an arc. So in this way we get a nice, if you take a look at the cross sections, a nice transition, roundish, roundish, and roundish to bottom roundish and top is squarish. And then all that stuff on top, and we zip, cut away. And the bottom part is also nice and fluid. So this is actually pretty awesome, I think. Not as wide because I adjusted the geometry, so I might have to play a little bit with those settings. No, I can't scale anymore because I use actually a mirror modifier, but that's not a big deal because now I can simply push and pull. Makes everything a tick faster. And maybe this one go in there. Okay. Perfect. I'm still trying to see if I could kick out a little bit more of geometry, and the main reason for why I try to do that is the less geometry, the less, let's say, by accident unevenness I put into my surface. Also means easier to control, and maybe a tick harder to create, to get details in, but I have less geometry to work with, and it will be easier then to smooth things out. And you see here actually that worked out perfect. No, actually that worked out perfectly. I'm not mistaken, that's the proper way to say it. Push this one there. Good. Maybe up here, this one. Let's move this one up, and this one maybe down. Same here, and same there. Okay, and the rest here will be, we can push this down a little bit, which means then this has to go up a notch. This chunky later we will trim away anyway, so it doesn't really matter much. Okay, good. So at this part I would say this is a good model, and I will call this one maybe Toothbrush Sculpted Final, so I know what it is. And also, this is the object. I will name also the mesh data. So again, this is actually mesh. So what you see here, the mesh information is stored in this data block, and this object center point functions as a container where all the meshes being put in. Think about it as a text frame, and that is then this object. And wherever this object X, Y, Z in scale, whatever is, there please display this geometry. So for example here, this is Toothbrush Start, and we can call this one also Toothbrush Start Mesh. so it's easier to take a look at. For example, here we can call this one tip trim, and same here, tip trim. Okay, so why did I do this? I would like to start some splittings. So on a new layer, let's create a plane. This plane, let's scale down. Then I move it, maybe it doesn't matter really to where. Let's say there. But definitely I want this one to be centered in my world. And let's scale this one down. Okay. And then let's do something like this. I do a very coarse approximation of maybe how many extrusions I need. Then I can select all those outer edges, say mean crease, and then add a subdivision surface modifier 3, and because this will be used for trimming, I will turn this one display into wire. Oh, I don't have this yet, so let's say trim. Let's maybe make this color for the moment. Oh, I go with this green there. Okay, so now when I project the polygon mesh right onto my surface and I go to CV display from the side, now I can always select all these CVs and then start selecting and pushing them around. And you see again, try to have least amount of points so I get nice and even and smooth curves. So this is actually kind of similar to the way how the spline works in Fusion with the fit points. Okay, perfect. So one more look. Good. So let's say this is not material. Let's say this is actually, I want to give this object a new material. So U will be called overmold, and maybe be this color. Okay, good. I use a different color than actually the screenshot, so you can separate what's the screenshot and what's the my model. So let's call this one trim overmold handle. Okay. And yeah, let's select the body, go to the modifiers, Boolean, difference, and then select this part. And the direction is wrong. Okay, not a big deal. I could easily go in. Let's take a look at the face normal. We see the face normal at mesh display normals 1 centimeter, and you see wherever that normal faces to when I do a Boolean command, so difference, where the face normal look to, that will remain and the rest will be gone. And because the mesh completely intersects and cuts through this object, it actually cuts away that other part. And again, it's important that actually the vertices really, not vertices, the surface really, like a knife, cuts completely through. If not, you will get kind of like garbage like this. And again, always think about Boolean or so, like you take a knife and you cut something. Now, if you want to cut something off, you really have to cut through the complete object. Okay, so, but the normals face up, but actually I would like to maintain the other area. So there are two ways. I could simply make use of my normals to see how they look, and then say flip direction. Now you see they face this way, which means they will keep this part of the geometry. I could also simply have said flip the intersect and difference. That's the second way how we could do it. But actually I like to work with the modifier with the normals more. So why with the normals? So you see there's actually a second piece that remains. So I could go into edit mode, and then this looks like a nice S shape. So maybe this I take. So this last part here I Shift E1 crease, and then let's zip bend it down and see how we have to deform it to, for example, get that shape. Looks like this. Yeah, looks pretty good. Okay, and let's leave edit mode, and oh, we get kind of like this. So this makes no sense to the software what I try to do, because you see with the normals face to, it says, well, keep all this area here, but then I have this other face where the normals face down to, and it says, well, keep only this stuff down there, but discard everything on the other side. But then this face, the normals are facing to it, I tell the software to keep it. So kind of illogical. Not a big deal. We simply select all this and then say flip direction, and you see now this surface kind of like describes this area to keep, and those normals describe this area to keep. So if I leave edit mode now, there, see that? Perfect. So how do I do now the other part, the white one? So this is now where clones come in. So I will go object and then say duplicate linked. I do not move it, so I press escape. And I would to get the opposite result. In this case, actually here for this one, I have to say intersect. And you see there now with intersect, instead of keeping those areas, it actually keeps the volume between these two surfaces. Well, this is a little bit difficult to take a look at right now. As you can see, it's kind of tough to understand what's what. So let's clean this design up a little bit first. So here we say tip. Actually, now for this object tip, we can delete that modifier because this rubber overmolded part does not reach the tip, so there's no point in having the tip modifier there. So let's say overmold handle. Then let's click this one. So here actually we can call this one tip because there I would like to see it, and then we can call this one overmold handle. Okay, but the materials are different, so let's maybe also call this one, this is sculpted handle, for example, and let's select the overmolded part and say overmold. Okay, and you see these two objects, because I made a linked design, not like a linked copy, they use the same mesh. And now if, for example, I go to one point, and let's say here, move this one to there, and leave it, these two objects have exactly the same geometry. So a design change to one object will reflect the design change also to the other object. maybe let's move this one here to the side so it's better to see. So you see I make everything bigger, and there you can see how these two shells exactly fit. And again, that's the beauty of working with clones, because you can share geometry data between different objects. And then with the modifiers, we just split them. Blender does not have a split tool, for example, like Fusion. So we, in this case, unfortunately, have to do this workaround with two clones and then just trim them. But in the end, same end result. Because in Fusion, we end up with two objects, and in Blender here, I work with two objects. But how do I get the materials different? Currently, this is really difficult to read. So let's go to the materials tab, and you see this one is linked to data. So what's data? Well, data is, this is data, the mesh. So the mesh gets that color. That's not really what I want. I actually want maybe this part to give it a different material to the object, however. So I can click object, and look at that. And for example, we can make a new material and say plastic. And here, just for the sake of demonstration, you can see we can color it. Pretty awesome. Okay, terrible color, copy, and you can actually drag and drop colors as well. Does this work? No, but this works. Okay, white to white doesn't really do much, so zip. Yeah. Or this way, zip, zip. Or copy C, copy V, or Control C, Control V. Okay, so this part is actually done. But there is a small design feature. You see how this is actually cut out? So how do we do this? So let's actually create another plane there. I will set my 3D cursor X and Y to 0. Create a plane, scale this one down. There. Looks like this one has to be rotated a little bit. So let's switch to local modes, which I am in. Okay, let's move this one over. Good. So why did I do this? Well, I can select everything as XX, so scale along local. Two loop cuts, SXX, and then those two. Oh, you stay. Zip. Let's go up. I have something like this. And then I can select all these edges and, for example, crease them, and then Control 3, add, for example, a sub D modifier, and let's project it onto the surface. Okay, how far does this now fit actually our design? Not very closely, so let's see what we can do to adjust this. Maybe two loop cuts here to flatten that size. Not size, side. And actually that did a lot of the trick there. Maybe bring this one in, bring this one out to give it that arc. That seems to do it. So maybe here I simply select all those points. Oh, there it is. Perfect. So maybe here push this one out. So but how do I get this arc? Well, the arc is actually pretty simple. The sides I have to push down, but if I push the sides down, the whole object moves. So I need at least one or maybe two loop cuts at the center. Why two loop cuts? So if I push this down, you see this is a nice arc. If I only go with one loop cut, it is more flat than it arcs, and it is more flat. So the curvature is a little bit rounder when I have two loop cuts. But now I don't know how wide this thing is. It's probably too wide. Oh yeah, it is. So AA, S and Y, scale this one down. There. Good. And for example, I could probably select those points here and then along the local z-axis, simply move it down till maybe you see I get that type of a curve. Okay, so it intersects there and there. Okay. What happens if I do this? See, then I can actually change this a little bit. Currently this is a flat line. So I assume actually this is, I want to have something more like this. Or this. Oh, we can play around with it anyway later. Okay, good. Tick to narrow. So I select these two loop cuts here, S and Y, make it a tick wider. Good. Let's give this a material, trim. And for example, this one is fingertip trim. Let's do it also here. Good. And yeah, so each object here I have to add another Boolean modifier. Difference, and this one. Oh, it keeps that part. So I can select everything here. Oh, I clicked too fast. Select everything, Control N, flip direction. And let's also maybe show this one this way as a wire. Okay, good. Let's go to that one. One Boolean modifier. Let's do exactly the same difference and cut this top part off. Oh, it's pretty smart class. Cut the top part off by the top part. So click the wrong part. Oh, you see there are some faces. I forgot actually to make this one shade smooth. So select everything, spacebar, and smooth shade zip. Exit, and there we are. Beautiful. So let's see what we have. Do I like this shape? So if I put my thumb down, I probably have a decent amount of surface. Yeah, Volkswagen really is an issue. Shouldn't have cheated. But I think I can leave this way. And again, talking about clones, etc., and shared mesh data. Let's actually set this one down to 2 so it calculates faster. And 2. Now, if, for example, I would like to change this one to come a little bit more forward, I could select whatever object I want. And for example, here, select all this, move it to there. Obviously, I have to move it so it still sits in there. And you see then each object has exactly the same change applied to because it share the same mesh. And then when I split everything, those two parts perfectly fit because the white part is carved out of the same geometry like the blue part. Okay, I think this actually looks pretty nice. And this kind of concludes part 1. This is basically all about how to create the initial body prototype and doing some preliminary split tests. In the second video, we will actually take a look at how we could now detail this one more. So for example, you see there are lines cut out. There is also, for example, the letter dental, and you see when it raises out. So how could we, for example, do something like this? And then also, how do we do the bristles?